Okay, so welcome to the Juxtaposition lecture series on contemporary cultural production at the Berlin University of the Arts. My name is Lukas Feireiss, and in this weekly format I invite various cultural producers from all around the world, artists, designers, architects, curators, thinkers, writers, and theater directors alike to talk about the often hybrid and heterogeneous work and world. Today, in an era in which classical classifications and binary categorizations simply don't hold any truth anymore upon the realities we live in, this Juxtaposition lecture series promotes a transdisciplinary discourse outside given norms and forms that embraces ambivalence, contradiction, and collaboration. Today, I'm super thrilled and excited to have acclaimed and award-winning Berlin-based theater director Susanne Kennedy with us. Thank you so much for being here, Susanne.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm I'm in the midst of rehearsals, which is always a really intense process because I'm not rehearsing so much. So I do one, maybe two productions a year, and it's so intense. It's like a kind of tunnel. So every night I'm completely exhausted because I don't know, I was talking to the others today, why does it cost so much energy to do this? And I always forget afterwards, but yeah, now I remember it kind of takes everything out of you, especially the first 3 weeks, because it's like you have to get something out of nothing, which is kind of crazy. So, but yeah, I mean, it's exciting, but it's also hard work.
Great. Actually, I'd love to pick up on a lot of topics you already raised in your answer. But let me briefly introduce you to the students. So Susanne Kennedy is a theater director that is known for the exploration of the relationship between bodies and technology in her dramaturgical work, often through formally experimental adaptations of books, films, and classic plays, ranging from Enda Walsh, Sarah Kane, and Elfriede Jelinek to Rainer Maria Fassbinder, to mention but a few, but also in the plays she writes herself. Her plays, her shows make use of distorted masks, of playback dialogue, and internet aesthetics, multimedia to reflect about our contemporary living conditions and living experiences, one could say. And in recent years, Susanne, you created several plays and installations together with your partner, Markus Selg. You've created, for example, the Coming to Society, which I think was your first piece at the Volksbühne in 2019, and then ULTRAWORLD in 2020, your second work in Berlin, and now coming up, what you're rehearsing is your new piece in a few weeks from now, Jessica.
So, I had a piece, the first piece was Women in Trouble, 2017. That's the piece I did when Chris Derkon was at the Volksbühne.
And this was actually the first piece that I saw of you at the Volksbühne.
Okay, yeah.
I have been a fan ever since.
Nice.
I understood that the collaboration with Markus Selg started at a later point, but then it was already earlier.
Ah, you meant the collaboration? Yeah, the collaboration started with Coming Society. So yeah, that's when it started, 2018. Yeah.
But Women in Trouble, yeah, it has been for me the door opener and a mind-blowing experience. But all that said, welcome, Susanne Kennedy. You already said that you had a long day of rehearsals, so and they're quite exhausting. But how are they going, and what are you working?
So I wrote this script again. I call them scripts because I always try to make kind of a very film-like script in a way. And so it's called Jessica, an Incarnation, and it's about a modern prophet, female prophet, and the effect she would cause in this time now. How would she be perceived? Could we even recognize something like a prophet? How would we react to it? And I kind of used the Jesus story to build up on, but then I used again things from all different kind of, from Reddit, from blogs, from YouTube videos, and put it together. And so she's this prophet, and there's a group around her that a group of young people that follow her. So she could be, you could say she's a kind of guru, but also not. So she's a kind of strange figure that you can't really grasp. So, and I kind of developed this script, and now I have the problem: how do I put this script into reality, or make something out of it? Because the script I wrote with a very more like a film in my mind, but then I make theater. So it's like I sit in two chairs, I write the script, and then I go with it to the rehearsal room, and I really have trouble working with the script because it's made in during a different time, and then I bring it to the rehearsal room with the actors, and then I have to solve it, what I created for myself in a way. And it's it's eight people and a sound designer, because everything is playback, so we record the whole script basically before in the studio, so we make a kind of soundtrack for the whole thing. And so there is a soundtrack, and then the actors jump in, but it's not finished yet, the soundtrack, so we also make the soundtrack during rehearsals. So we're working on all different levels at the same time, and that sometimes can be a bit mind-blowing, because it's so difficult sometimes to grasp it, because you want to create an effect, but then how do you get to that effect? And sometimes you have to let go of all your expectations that you had beforehand, and really be in the here and now and see what's happening now and what works and doesn't work. So it's a kind of editing, montage, and creating at the same time. And it's intense, yeah. So
again, many topics that we will come back to again, from the montage to the editing. So let's say you also brought a few kind of or two clips from two of your plays, and before we maybe show the students some excerpts from them, let's say your approach to theater, and that's already clear from your first two answers, is let's say rather unique, and is not following the kind of a classical understanding of stage theater, or kind of you break these kind of ideas. But for those that are listening today that might not be familiar with theater or with your work, how would you best describe your theater plays?
I think I try to stretch this idea of theater to a point where you might not even perceive it as theater anymore, and yet at the same time try to go to the very essential, basic question that theater puts in front of us. The situation there, people sitting here watching someone else pretending to be someone else, and apparently we have this this need as human beings to do this, because I see it in children. They start to do it very early, is taking on different roles, play, acting, and so there's something very essential, I would say, in that, and I try to explore it, but explore it in a way that I often miss in a theater, because I feel, if I go and see plays, then I feel that a lot of I would say a lot of theater situations don't ask these basic questions and just jump right ahead to the content. But it's such a strange thing, theater, and it's a very good metaphor, I think, for life. and reality, and I try to use that to to dig deeper, I guess, into reality and ask the very basic questions. It's like, what is this here? What is this reality? Who am I? And what's the point of me being here? And I use the theater to explore that, I guess.
It's deeply philosophical, yeah, rather like ontological questions that you're raising with your kind of notion of theater. You brought, or I have here Chekhov's Three Sisters and also ULTRAWORLD. One is an adaptation. It's also very telling, and the other one is a script that you wrote. Shall we start with Chekhov just for a couple of minutes, or skip through to give kind of a visual impression to the listeners?
Yeah, sure.
Quick feedback, you guys can see everything, no? Maybe I...
Jetzt bin ich fertig.
Repeat.
Warte einen Augenblick. 1. Warte noch ein bisschen. 2. Jetzt bin ich fertig.
Ich trinke jetzt ein Gläschen Wein, Kinder. Das Leben ist süß. Zweimal geht man nicht zugrunde.
Another scene that I should jump to that you prefer, Susanne?
No, just choose anything you like.
Okay. maybe one last.
Buntstifte. Buntstifte.
So, as a kind of first impression, wait, no, here an adaptation of theater classic, Chekhov's Three Sisters. Maybe before we go into ULTRAWORLD, you can say a few words about this play, or kind of how it originated, what made you choose Chekhov, what your ideas for the scenography, the dramaturgy it was.
Yeah, what interested me about this thing is that it actually is such a classic. So I was thinking about these three sisters, and this play is being performed all over the world at some place, somewhere, all the time. So, and I thought, so what is this fascination that we have of watching these three sisters not getting to Moscow over and over again, basically. So we go to the theater and we know that this is going to happen, that they're kind of stuck in this situation. They never get out, and they just dream of Moscow. And what it is with these classics, that these characters have to repeat over and over again the same thing, like Medea has to kill her children, Hamlet has to say to be or not to be, and the three sisters do not get to Moscow. So they're kind of stuck in this loop that they never get out. And we as an audience, we have this kind of need to watch these characters not get there or die or whatever happens to them over and over again. And I thought, so what's this fascination in watching them? And we are kind of also, in a way, responsible for them being held within this eternal loop. And then I used Nietzsche, where he asked this question, so what would you do if a demon would come to you at night and ask you the question, or tell you you have to live the life you're living now, exactly the same life over and over again? Would you throw yourself to the ground in despair, because it's like a horror idea, or would you embrace it and say yes to it, which is kind of very very important question, what it means, how you look at your life. So I put this question before the three sisters, and basically it's a reflection on that question, what to do with your life and how to live it, and because they never get out, and I used like basically one scene in different variation that kind of repeats itself over and over again, but I use different translations, so it's just a little variation of that scene, and asking the question, so do we get out of our own loops? Kind of also the trauma that we encounter in our lives, and we keep repeating situations till they get so bad that we learn something from them, or we recognize it, that we keep repeating the same loop over and over again. So that's something I used the three sisters to kind of think about. So it's a kind of, again, an ontological, philosophical reflection, and using the classic, and then it's kind of set in this white box. And we kind of tried to work on it, that sometimes this white box is like a time and space machine. So sometimes the three sisters, because we work with these blackouts in between, it's as if they are like go through kind of black hole, and then you see the white box again, and suddenly it's three really old ladies, but sitting in everyday clothes in the situation. So it's a kind of parallel universe. I always very much like this last scene from Space Odyssey 2001. I don't know if you remember it, where he
lays in bed in this beautiful room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he's in the bed, he's really old, and he stands there looking at himself, and I think he has a younger version also sitting at the table, then a really old version of himself dying in the bed, he looking at himself, and then you have the space child. So it's like in the same moment, you look at yourself like basically in like the range of your whole life, and it's all you at this same moment. And also the room, as if the room reflects your own deep inner state of being somehow. And so we try to create a room that does that. And we always try to create a machine in a way in a theater that makes that possible. So a machine that kind of travels through time and space, which of course completely is not possible in a theater, but we try to do it anyway and find something, how we somehow get there. So we work a lot with the sound, obviously. Video is very important. The machinery of the theater, try to use that always intensively.
I love your reference to film again in Kubrick and 2001 as a classic masterpiece there, which is also very dominated usually by central perspective. No? All of Kubrick's movies have this clear central perspective, which actually resonated in what we just saw for Three Sisters. No? The white box in the middle, always very much at the center of the image that's created on the stage. And another nice reference I just thought of with Kubrick's last image, like literally the last frame of 2001 is this star child gazing upon Earth, I believe. And the very first image of the next movie is Alex in the Molokka milk bar in Clockwork Orange, which is sort of the like uncanny side of things, which somehow also totally relates to your work, if I now come to think of it.
Yes. Yeah, that was always a very, very important film for me also, because it's as if Alex is watching us, watching him. So you constantly have to you feel like uncanny, it's unsettling, because you can't just lie back and watch this film, but you're kind of, he does something to you that you feel, okay, I'm not innocent in this whole thing. And this has been very important to me, how I also worked with actors. I used it more intensively when I was younger, but then I worked with them very special, especially on a way of acting that they would say the texts in a way that it was like, so is this how you want me to play this scene? Okay, then watch me play the scene. I'm going to do it for you because you are watching me. I wouldn't be playing this if you wouldn't be watching me, which created a kind of tension, but you as a spectator were part of it. So it's also an interacting between the spectator and the actor. So which I think is quite important.
Another correlation obviously connects again you to Kubrick, to Freud, the uncanny, the doppelganger, the revenant, the repeating, the loop you mentioned. And this brings us in direct connection to last week's talk by Nicolas Bourriot, who spoke of the loop as kind of the sign of our times, or the sign of the crisis of our times. The loop in his case meant that he started very simply by the image of the mad cow disease, which was created because cows were fed meat, or that was made from cows. So there was a loop happening, or fish were fed fish. And the big financial crisis in 2008, I'm kind of paraphrasing Bourriot, is money being fed to money, and now art being fed by art, etc. So that the sign and crisis of our times is actually the loop. And that's, I mean, one of the main devices that kind of reoccurs in your work too.
Yes, the loop is fascinating also because it makes you the loop, it's a kind of spiral, because the loop, so it's the same thing but different. So there is that not also Deleuze in the répétition et différence, that it's kind of it repeats but it's different, and the question is, when do you learn something? So you keep repeating yourself, and sometimes you can do that for a lifetime and never learn anything. But is there a moment where there comes in some kind of awareness that you can break the loop, or even recognize that you are in the loop? Because it's very difficult when you're within it to have a kind of awareness about it. So, and that to me is that is very much the question, because of course I'm also in my own loops that I don't see. Sometimes you can see it afterwards, sometimes never. Sometimes you have other people who show you that you're stuck in a loop. But that to me is something that I really try to use. Well, basically to use art in a way, isn't it? Someone said art is the technology to show fish that they're wet, in a way. So because we don't see that we're fish in the water because we're in the water. So what does it feel like to be in the water? What does wet feel like? How can we get to that perspective?
This makes me think actually of a comment that one of the students had on Nicolas Bourriaud's lecture, again connecting to you. There's a famous lecture by David Foster Wallace. It's called "What is Water?"
Yes.
I think that's kind of where it comes from, where
probably,
it's an incredible lecture that all of you should see. You can find it on YouTube, 20 minutes long, and it starts with a joke of two fishes meeting in the ocean. The older fish meets two younger fish, and the older fish asks, "So, hey guys, so how's the water?" And it kind of swims along, and the two fish, the young fish, look at each other and think, "What the hell is water?"
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of, and that's kind of that the job of art is kind of to make us understand in a way also what is water. You know?
Yes, and also that so part of that is what is water is also to recognize that we talk in scripts, that we're like, as soon as you're born, you're handed a script and you learn it completely by heart, and you think, but I came up with this script. This is me being, talking, having ideas, but of course it's part of the script. So I also try to use this so I constantly have also in the scenes that we rehearsed today, that someone says, but is this real? Wait a minute, but she's an actress. I thought this was real, what we're doing here. I completely believed in it. And that you constantly, like, you open a veil and a new veil appears, and you keep opening veils, and you can go on forever. You will never find out like what's really real. So these constant meta levels that just keep adding up, and that you can never kind of get through.
Okay, so it's funny because Mike, I have to follow up there's too many good points that you're making there. So speaking of like the scripted reality, so to speak, which you just said, or that we kind of are born with a script, I think you just used that image. And this, since we just talked about the loops as a definitely a reoccurring theatrical device in your work, another one, maybe more in the beginning and not yet anymore, but still was the mask, or the distorted mask. Which, and I'm trying to connect this now to the scripted reality, or our personality kind of following a certain script, made me think of, I remember when I saw your pieces for the first time, of the kind of usage also of the mask, really in the classical, almost antique sense of the theater. The word personality comes from persona. And persona was the mask that was used in Greek theater to mask the actor. So in a way, it comes from personare, to sound through. So this understanding of a personality is actually a mask. And this is totally what I see again in your work. And then it brings back to what you said in the beginning. On the one hand, you want to kind of stretch the idea of theater, but also bring it back to the very essential questions that theater has always raised since the beginning of theater. And to me, this comes together in the image of the mask. And this plays along with the idea of kind of a scripted personality. Or am I taking it too far here?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And persona comes from the Greek. Well, it's Latin, but it means the sound that travels through. So, because of course, in the theaters, that especially the Greek theaters, it was far away, so you had to use the masks to have the sound get to the very back. So it's persona, and then that's what person comes from. And when we talk about person, we never think that we're actually using the word mask. Yes, so absolutely, it's completely connected, and it comes down to this very ontological question. So, what does it mean if someone says, "I am"? Basically, you have already so many problems, or let's say, so many exciting questions if someone says that. So, if someone comes on stage and says, let's say, for example, just says, "I am Hamlet," then you already have a whole play, basically, because who is the person that says I am? Where is this person? What does it mean? So what's the reality this figure is speaking in, and how can he even speak? So I would say I started the very, very, very basic. What is a voice? What is a face? What is someone saying I? What is the situation that someone's saying I and someone else is watching this person? So there's a whole universe within the very basic setup of theater. And then, of course, Shakespeare already said the world's a stage and we're but players on it. And it doesn't mean he's talking about theater, but he's talking about this reality, basically. And so using theater to explore the world as a stage, for me, yeah, that's a kind of quest, I would say.
Okay, maybe we pick up another last theatrical device. Against the backdrop of the Teatro Mundi, the world as a stage, and you said you play with the voice, connecting this to the personare and the mask. Let's talk about the playback dialogue as a device in your pieces, which I find an incredibly powerful and extremely unsettling dramaturgical device. And if I may also have a cinematic reference, it always reminds me when I see it of the scene in David Lynch Mulholland Drive, where at one point they go into this kind of club silencio, and there's a lady coming on stage, Rebecca Del Rio, and she sings this really heartbreaking, sad song, and in the middle of the song she just falls flat, and you hear the song continuing to play. So it was all just a playback. But yeah, can you explain how you started to use the playback and started to use the voice separated from the actors within your plays?
So I already started very early to work very specifically with actors, how they would speak, because I try to get I guess a kind of film-like quality, because when I go to theater, I always hated how the actors talk, because often they're shouting or they need to do a special thing with their voice to project into the back of the. So I didn't like that. So, and I tried to work with them to speak in a different way, and we got to a certain point, but then I somehow we kind of experimented with playback in one play, and then it was like, what if we would do in one scene, and then we thought what if we would do the whole play like that? And I actually thought, but am I allowed to do that? You can't do that. It's not, allowed in the sense, because we have such narrow, our minds are so small that, I couldn't even think that I was possible to do that, because I thought, oh my God, but the actors and in the theater, it's like, because of course, probably people had done it, but I hadn't heard of it. So I had to kind of fight with myself before I dare to do it, but then I realized, okay, if I don't do it, then it's because I'm scared and I don't know what I'm going to do anymore. So I basically then said, okay, let's do the whole playback. And it suddenly also a whole new way of acting appeared, because if you do playback, in the beginning it was the actors did their own voices, but then later I also asked people who were completely not trained actors, so not trained voices, people, you know, also technicians from the theater or the parents of someone, or just, you know, just basically people who felt like doing it. And that for me was also a really important step, because it meant the working with the actor became something else. They had to start channeling the voice more or less. So they had to jump into the voice. And they couldn't, it's a different concentration, because then you have to sort of be very much, it's kind of composition that you then, you need the right timing. So you're much more busy with timing than with acting, I would say, which I like a lot, because I'm not too keen on acting. So, and then from there, we never look back. So we prepare the whole play basically in the studio, and then come to rehearsals. And it's basically pressing play, and then still we have to work on the scenes. But the actors, yeah, it's a different kind of working with actors than what they're usually used to.
Maybe take this as a cue to show a little bit of ULTRAWORLD. I'm going to share my screen again.
Yeah, it's also very much about the loop. It's kind of like a video game, and Frank, who's being played by Frank, he's a sort of avatar who gets caught up in this video game, and he has to find out. I don't think they understand us when we... Is it playing? People saying that they don't hear us. But is it already playing? I can't see it. Because it's not playing on my screen. Okay, strange. But okay, so they can hear me. Okay, then I'll. So it's Frank, and he is in this video game, and he has to kind of solve it. He has tests. He has 5 tests that he has to solve, and he doesn't even know what he has to solve. And they are.
War nur das große Selbst, das sich in Gestalt eines Menschen widerspiegelte. Sich besinnend fand es nichts als sich selbst. Und sein erstes Wort war: This am I.
Hello, Frank. Are you awake?
Because I like to be in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean.
No.
So you didn't have to tell your girlfriend.
I wouldn't do that.
I don't even know what the hell you do anymore.
Gabby, please.
No.
I didn't know.
No.
I didn't know.
No. I don't believe anything that comes out of your mouth, Frank.
Gabby.
No.
Please.
Can you please stop? No more lies. Okay, you make me sick.
We only have a bit left. We have nearly given up hope.
No rain.
I tried a cactus outside, but it was dry inside.
How about digging?
I know what you are thinking, Frank, but the answer is no. We need every last drop for the two of us.
Just a little bit for the girl?
Please leave us alone.
I'll stop it here. I understood that some of you didn't properly hear us when we were talking over the video, no? Correct?
We only didn't hear you, Lukas.
Okay, good. Well, never mind me, Susanne. Susanne is why we're here tonight anyways. But Susanne, sorry. So I think they heard you. We just saw some excerpts to get just like a first visual impression. But please continue. You were saying that ULTRAWORLD is about?
Yeah, it's about this avatar called Frank, and it's like he's caught up in this kind of like video game, but which is basically something like reality, our world. But it's like I also imagined what is it to be here, suddenly be dropped on Earth, and you have to find out the rules of what it means to be a human being. And basically, he's put into the situation, and he's told, this is your wife and this is your daughter, and they're thirsty. There's a water shortage, and they're thirsty, and they will die. So he's being told to go and get some water from the neighbors, and then he comes back without the water, and they die. And then test 2, he gets the water, brings the water to them, they still die. And the third, he actually gives the water to them to drink, and they still die. So basically nothing he does solves the situation. They always die. And he thinks he has to save them, but he can only break the loop, so the test, get to the next level, basically, if he understands that he cannot prevent them from dying, which is the human condition, that at one point you're going to die, and your loved ones are going to die. And only when he kind of accepts it and acknowledges it, that this is the test and not that he has to be the hero and save them, then something else opens up. And it's about his confusion, his anger, his fighting against this kind of setup of the game. And then there's a kind of group around him which kind of sets up the game around him. So the game designer who tries to design the game while he's playing it, and the people in it who basically play the characters, and then there are non-player characters, and what does it mean? How does he react to them? So it's a kind of hero's journey, but maybe a bit of a different one. And I also used kind of the Matrix, a lot of quotes from the Matrix. But it's also a quest in becoming aware, I guess. And I really like this idea of also virtual reality as a kind of metaphor for our reality, as if we walk around with this headset on all the time, and that this is how we perceive reality. So basically, the question is this all a hallucination? Is this reality a hallucination? And it seems like it is. I mean, everything points to that by now. So for me, I used ULTRAWORLD to try and explore that.
And kind of exploring maybe also theater as the original virtual reality? Yes,
and it comes from virtual reality. Actually, comes from Antonin Artaud. He used it as one of the first ones, and of course, theater is this simulation, one of the very first simulations that, we set up a kind of situation and then pretend it's real, and so in that sense, it's the first virtual reality. Yeah,
simulation that you could also argue kind of produces realities or allows us to reflect upon, or maybe even understand the artificiality of the world we live in, at its core. In the second lecture that we had here as part of Juxtaposition, we invited Omsk Social Club to talk about their practice and their highly engaged in live action role-playing as an artist collective. And they kind of brought a term with them that stuck with us of bleed space. So bleed space comes from gaming, and it denotes the bleeding of fiction into reality and of reality into fiction. And that's the term that comes from gaming. And I feel like you always create bleed spaces in your plays.
Yes, definitely, because it's then when it gets most interesting, I think. But the interesting thing is you have to make the illusion so good before that when you break through. So you need everything, because I believe in building up the illusion in the best way you can, that you really, because I really want to feel in the theater. It's not like I want to go in and then constantly be on this meta level, but I want to be sucked in, and while I'm like in there deep inside, I want to have I want to, as if those two spaces merge. Bleed space, I have never heard of it, but it sounds really interesting. Yeah. So it's this space that I find, so that when I'm most deep inside the illusion, maybe that I come out the other side somewhere. So I'm so deep inside, I so accept it and embrace it, that it's so real somehow that I walk out the other side or something like that. I don't know. So, but it's something like that.
And I was also thinking, when you spoke of gaming as kind of the main kind of image and metaphor for ULTRAWORLD, or being stuck inside a game in the hero's journey, I was thinking again about your loops, or like eternal recurrence, because in computer games, usually you have a hero's journey too, but if you don't succeed, you're stuck in the loop of doing the level again and again and again. So there's another connection that I see there,
Yes, absolutely. And what's also interesting is I also have that in films, or when I watch a movie or a series or something like that, I always observe the people in the background, like the how do you call them? Statisten in German. It's the people who are just passing on the street, the non-character players, basically.
Extras.
The extras, exactly, yeah. is so fascinating to observe them, how they pretend, how they make up this reality that we then have to believe in, because they pretend, you know, we're just passing, we're pretending that this is real. This is for me, this is always the things that make it really exciting, where I then think, okay, let's start from them, let's start from the extras, and how they are acting. To me is always really fascinating, how they create this reality we then believe in.
It's the details, no, that really make the reality or the fiction perfect. In an interview that I watched with you, you described your kind of dramatic or dramaturgical compositions and the representations of the drama on stage as a dramaturgy. That's a horrible word in English. Of hyperlinks, a dramaturgy of hyperlinks, in which the viewer kind of moves through the play similar to the way one moves or would move through the internet. Can you elaborate on that? I love that image.
Yeah, it's basically how we because we, of course, we spend so much time in the internet or all the different channels, and so basically I would say it's how I prepare my scripts, is that I read something about something, and then I find something, oh, that's interesting, let's click on it, and I go through a window to a different level, to a different site, to a different reality. And this is what I do all the time, and I collect information and windows, basically. So it's as if you climb through the window, or you know, in your browser, and you go to the next one, and you kind of climb through time and space like that. So you you can get anywhere. You can get to very different voices, very different time spaces. And this is basically how I build up my plays and the script also. And this is now what's so difficult in the rehearsal space, because I have that dramaturgy, and then but I still have to make sense of it on the in the rehearsal room. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, how can I get from this situation to the next? Because then theater is so much, someone's here, someone's here, and this is the space we're in. So how do I make this hyperlink dramaturgy possible in a way? Because with film, of course, it's very different. Time and space is something that can be much more manipulated. But how do I do it in the theater? And that's something I always have to find out. And sound is very important there. Also, the kind of acting we use.
It reminds me of this internet meme. My mind is like a web browser. 19 tabs are open, and 3 of them are frozen, and I have no idea where the music in the background is coming from. No, it's like this famous meme. But yes. Kind of seems to describe also your way of working. Mine too, by the way.
Yes. I think it's everybody's now, right? I mean, this is how we live and work without even thinking about it. So I think it's clear that in theater we have to start using that too, because this is that's what people are used to now. And so you have to be also really fast in the switching, because this is also how people how people think and work and deal with subjects every day. So the dramaturgies also have to change for sure.
But can we get a bit deeper on your the practicalities of your working process? Because I can imagine, obviously, it's a very complex process of creating a piece on stage with so many people kind of joining in. In particular, as you said, you start this kind of almost sampling-like process of creating a text, but then record the voices, and basically the actors are confronted with the voices, with the soundtrack to act to. Or can you like in more detail, if that's even possible, kind of try to share how we can imagine this process or your method of operation?
Yeah, So the sound designer is very important. He and I work so closely together. So basically, yeah, we record the voices and then he makes a composition of the voices. And something that's also really important is that the people come to the studio and they record their lines basically without knowing any context, without knowing what they're reacting to. So and then the sound designer, puts them back together again. So sometimes it sounds really strange because someone answers a question or in a situation that if you would know the situation, you would react like that, which makes the whole situation sometimes really weird, even though it seems quite normal on the page. But then how they use grammar, how they use their voice to react to something. And then, so he makes a composition out of that. And then we start in the rehearsal room, basically first, once we listen to the whole composition. And then the actors basically have to get acquainted with their voice and also see what kind of body does this voice have? Where in my own body do I find this voice? And basically make a movement to it. So they open and close their lips. So they pretend that the voice comes from their body, basically, and they have to make us believe, that we believe it. And so there is a scene in sound, but not in body. And then we rehearse like this, that we give body to the sound. And find actions to it, basically, yeah. And I have to make things plausible or logic, even if they don't seem to have because then I don't use these kind of very logical stories. Then I have to see, okay, how do I get from this situation to that, and make it very easy, very like it's the most natural thing in the world that you jump from this situation to the next and completely accept it. So that's mostly the problem right now in rehearsals, that I completely jump from that idea to this idea and then back, and I have to make it feel really easy and really natural, and that's difficult right now. So
it sounds like either collage composition or a composed collage that you're working on there. Yes.
But you have to find the flow underneath that connects everything with everything. And I always try to find an image, like we're now saying, okay, so this whole thing is one big ritual, that everything is part of this ritual, even though this doesn't look and sound at all like a ritual, but it's still part of it. So we have to find that's what I mean with an inner logic. It's like a choreography in a way, but that choreography has to have a deeper meaning, that it means something, that why do we even put this on, or why do we watch this? This has to have this kind of deep layer that connects everything with each other. And it's like weaving also. We have to weave the different strands together, and then the video comes in and it comes right at that moment, which it has then this meaning and the sound.
I'm now also following the drift, so to speak, a little bit. But you mentioned now channeling the voices, you mentioned the ritual, and we spoke earlier about kind of your attempt to kind of stretch the understanding of theater, but also to kind of come back to its very origins. And this kind of, in particular, the notion of the ritual makes me think of theater in antiquity, or even like you spoke of the new piece being about a female prophet. I'm thinking of Passionsspiele or Mysterienspiele. So there's this another level of kind of the original sources of theater that you seem to be kind of bringing back to life or dealing with, even if in completely new clothes.
Yes, it is this kind of, I guess I feel, I have the feeling other people too, that we have this longing for some kind of space and place where there's a possibility to meet and to experience something together that puts us in a different state of being than that is our just everyday normal work life, whatever kind of state. So it is even what you could compare to a kind of trance or, trip or something like that. If the theater could, I have this longing myself to experience something like that puts you in a different mindset. And I was also studying these ancient ritual initiations. Basically, they were where you would have people, the new initiates, and they would have to, go through a very specific set of instructions and do these things. And there were also drinks they got and put them in a certain state that was not anymore in any kind of rational state. So it's also a religious experience to some extent, without being religious in the sense that it belongs to a certain kind of religion, but that it, of course, then connects it to these very basic questions we were talking about, these ontological questions, which often got kind of, answered by religions. And nowadays that's not so interesting anymore. So I guess we are trying to find a different way to get to these questions, and you sometimes need a different state of being. I also have people who tell me that they fell asleep right away. So they come to the theater, they worked all day and they come to the theater, then they fall asleep. And because I also start often very slowly, and you need to have some patience, I guess. And then they sleep, and then they wake up, and then they're in the right state of mind, I guess. So, yeah, I like these different kind of ways of being, I guess. And I try to use the theater to get the audience there.
Hmm. And now I'm curious, what got you interested in theater in the first place? So, what made you decide to study directing? Basically, what was your gateway to theater?
For me, it was not something I didn't really have a very clear idea what theater was. I just thought it would be, because I also didn't see that much theater before I actually studied it. So I wasn't like a theater expert or anything. I just had this idea that I would like to do it, but I didn't know that much about it. I kind of also only really learned about it when I started studying directing, and before I thought maybe I want to be an actress. So it was very vague. It was very vague. I completely did not have these ideas that I have now. I always was interested in very specific details, but I didn't have a general idea what I would like to do with theater, or that I wanted to change theater, not at all. So it was very much kind of, I came from the outside and thought, maybe that could be interesting. But took me a long time to define, in a sense, what I wanted with it, or what I saw myself doing with it. And also in the beginning, when I was working, it was much more more classical. Or let's say I copied the directors I knew at that time, like Marthaler and also Castorf. That was, Castorf not so much, more Marthaler, but that's how I started. So it wasn't very spectacular or anything.
And I'm thinking with theater, because in a way it appears almost as an old school art, let's say, today. I think of my father's generation, that's a classical theater goer. He saw every play in the city, he went to every Theatertreffen. It was really a way to kind of reflect upon the world we live in. Whilst this seems to be, let's say, fading more in the younger generation, but what do you think, what unique qualities or powers does theater still have for you now, 2 decades into the 21st century?
I think what is really, really important now is that it happens in the here and now, which is something that's very special at this moment in time, and has a great power, and especially this ritual that I myself have a longing for. So that you go somewhere, that you're prepared to be quiet for, let's say, 2 hours, to go together into the dark and to experience something that happens in the here and now. And there are real people in front of you that act this out and take you somewhere. They're like these, from Tarkovsky, this film Stalker. They take you into the zone and take you somewhere maybe that you haven't been before. So this is my longing for what theater can do. Of course, it often doesn't happen, but it sometimes happens, and when it does, it can be very strong.
Yeah, beautiful. And maybe I would dive a little bit more into kind of the collaborative nature of it. You said there's, for this play, I think 8 people on stage. You have the sound. You work together with your partner Markus Selg on the entire scenography of it. So it's a very complex and highly collaborative process. How can we imagine the setup to be like, or like, can you elaborate on the team structure and also what your kind of biggest learnings are regarding such collaborative processes?
Well, they're not easy because I fight a lot with my sound designer. So it's sometimes more, it sounds better than it is in practice, but we have to move through this because, of course, he has ideas in his head how he wants a scene to feel like, and then I have it, and we have to find each other within that, and that sometimes can be quite hard. I think, I have a really, really great team, and of course, Markus and I are at the very beginning, so formulating the concept and trying to get a basic setup frame for it, and then the rest moves in. And it's, I don't know, sometimes I think how are we doing this? Because every time I rehearse and we're in the midst of a project, I'm thinking, however did we get to that point that we showed it to an audience and it was this thing that did this? And sometimes it's so, we do it intuitively, but sometimes it's also so hard. So how it actually happened, I have really good people who also very much think from a meta level and try to put it into practice every day in rehearsal. And then we step back and we talk, but it's, I don't know. Sometimes I also wonder how to do this. Sometimes in rehearsals, I'm so confused. I go back to my computer and I just type into Google rhythm, how to do rhythm. Because it's so, sometimes it's just, you don't know where to get it from. So yeah.
So how do you, apart from then Googling, but you said it's not easy, this kind of nightmare of collaboration sometimes, or participation, and yet it's the kind of the most beautiful thing that can happen. But how do you deal with this, or generally with these type of frustrations or disillusionments or setbacks, because any professional career, as fancy as it may be or not or whatever, there are setbacks, and it's really about how we also deal with them, or kind of what tricks we learn how to deal with them. So what's yours?
Yeah, the setbacks, basically it's how you define them. It's very much up to you. It's, do you define a setback as something like, oh, this completely went wrong and this completely is the worst, blah, 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 and you make the setback bigger and bigger and bigger? or you try to keep it small. You kind of recognize what's happening, but try and take something out of it immediately and keep working with it, which is basically what I always try to do. So I always feel that oftentimes there is a possibility for me to kind of fall into that feeling, this is a setback, this is not working, and it kind of can spiral into that direction. So I guess I really very much developed a discipline of not doing that, and so we have let's say we have a run through, and we had one which was like awful. It's really painful to watch. And then I really feel how I could go with that and stay with that and think, oh my God, and how is this, what do we have to do with it? And why is this so bad? And da. Or I can just say, okay, this is this run through and we just keep working. And I don't stay with it for too long. And which is something I would advise, to use that word, is not to, I mean, of course, there might be a situation where it goes really deep and you really feel like, okay, now I need some time and to rethink this. But basically, it's just keep on working. So keep on working, and often things solve themselves. So I also have the feeling if I try to work on them, apparently problems work on them too much, they get bigger, but I can often just leave them and they solve themselves. So yeah, that's what I do.
See, that's already almost the next question of advice, but we take that one.
Oh, yeah.
Now, addressing now the student body, see if there's any questions from their side. Thank you so much until now for this beautiful conversation. It was very, very inspiring. So guys, everyone, if you have questions, you can write them in the chat, or you can just ask them directly. This is your moment or your chance. We'll give you a minute. Again, you know that there's no such thing as a stupid question. Comes up to mine. Yeah, sometimes it's difficult. It's totally fine after a long conversation to kind of go into asking more questions. Yeah, well then, let's see, maybe I ask my final question, which you kind of already answered, but I'll do it nonetheless. And usually then the moment you ask, then there's another question popping up. However, Susanne, I mean, you already gave actually the perfect advice at the end, huh? Of kind of keep on working, and kind of things usually solve themselves. That's actually very beautiful advice. Because it is so true. Things also tend to get bigger the longer we look at them. But there is a question by Dimitro. And he's asking you, is there a specific theater you would like to do a play in, like a dream place?
I guess that's Volksbühne, actually. Because, I don't know, Volksbühne, for me, it's actually at the moment the best place because there's so much tension around this building all the time, also the past 5 years. And I had the feeling that it helps so much. Then if you show something on the stage, there's already such a vibe to it. And if people come in, they have expectation, it has this history, it has all this fighting around it. And I must say, I liked it a lot when this whole thing, all the things, when I was part of the whole DERCON debacle, because it was so interesting and exciting to be in the first row and watch this whole, theater play happening, and then also presenting something on that stage. So I think the Volksbühne is actually at the moment very much the ideal theater for me. And So I hope I can keep working there the next few years. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Actually, Dimitro also wrote in the chat, which is very beautiful. I completely didn't have these ideas that I have now. Sounds like I'm getting out of the loop. So yes, welcome to the next level, Dimitro, this conversation. Another question for Susanne in the chat. Then I will, then I come to the final question. You kind of did it already, but so it's our ritual here, Susanne, is the last question. What piece of advice could you give to all the becoming, artists, designers, theater directors, curators, and so forth, musicians listening to us today?
Yeah, so basically, I already said something about that, to not to go too deeply into things that you think are going wrong, because that's just an interpretation. And there are beautiful seeds actually in these moments where things apparently go wrong or an apparent setback. There is a lot of creativity in that, which is to be explored if you don't fear that moment. So because so much goes wrong in the productions I do, there's so many people, there's so much things are happening around me that I cannot control, and so there are always setbacks, and often a lot of beautiful things happen because of these apparent setbacks. So that just use them, really.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much for taking your time today, Susanne. It was beautiful talking to you, very, very inspiring. And for all of the listeners, your play, Jessica, will premiere, and a warm applause digitally, please, for Susanne, will premiere in a couple of weeks, I believe on the 24th or 25th of February already.
Yes, the premiere is 24th, and then we keep playing. So basically in February and then March. So it will be on the repertoire in the Volksbühne.
Great. So get your tickets. Good luck with the rehearsals, Susanne. I can't wait to see the play, and hopefully also to meet in person and not virtually. Thank you guys for being here. It was another great Monday evening with lots of food for thought to take into the week. And goodbye for now. Stay safe, take care, and see you next Monday evening for our second to last juxtaposition lecture, this time around with Korean digital artist and web designer Ji-won Song. Thank you all, and bye-bye.